Welcome back to the Grow Tent, you guys. I am so excited you guys are here with me. Happy Friday. I hope everybody had an awesome week. We've got a bunch of stuff to dive into today, but before we get started, if you guys are into aeroponics, into indoor gardening, and growing your own food, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Today we're going to be diving into the world of Dutch bucket systems and how it works with aeroponics. Alright guys, these are the two aeroponic Dutch bucket systems that I've got in my grow tent right now. I love them so much. I've been using them since the beginning, since the inception of this tent, and they are so incredible. Each system has 20 buckets, and depending on the lid that you choose, the back system has 4 vessels per lid, which means it can grow up to 80 plants. And this one over here is 1 vessel bucket, so we've got 20 different plants that can fit in one system. All right, so the first thing we've got to talk about is what is a Dutch bucket system by definition. So a Dutch bucket system is a system for plants where they can be individually grown within a grow medium, such as hydroclay, like the clay pebbles that I use. And the roots get periodically sprayed or misted with water and a nutrient solution. And any excess water and nutrients actually gets recirculated through the system back into the reservoir and is used again to feed the plants and water them once it's needed. So think about it as just a system that recycles and recirculates the water and nutrients until the plants have depleted everything, and then that's when we fill the system back up again and the process continues. So Dutch bucket systems can be hydroponic, they can be aeroponic, but regardless, it is such a great method of growing because the water and the nutrients are being recycled. You end up saving like 90% of the water you would use with traditional outdoor gardening and soil. These systems, the plants only take what they need, which is beautiful because there is no waste and you'll always know when your plants need more. Not all Dutch buckets are the same. Some are larger, some are smaller. You can even have Dutch bucket systems that are just 4 of these little buckets or even 2. The point is that it is the concept of recycling and recirculating the water and nutrients through the system so that there is no waste. So as it stands right now, I've only got 1 system in operation, but my first grow, I had both systems running simultaneously, and although I had an abundance of stuff, it was quite overwhelming because I am still new, I am learning, and so I figured this grow, let me master my technique and get a system in place before overwhelming myself and starting up the second system. One of the things I love the most about these systems is that the lids are interchangeable. So depending on the size of the plant that you're growing and the size of its root system, or just the quantity of plants you want to grow, you can choose if you want 4 plants to a bucket or 1 plant to a bucket. Later on in the video, we will go through which plants should be grown in which buckets depending on their root system and their size. Here are examples of the different lids. We've got our cucumber plant, which is solo in a bucket. The solo buckets have 4-inch net pots, and it is 1 plant to a bucket. As you can see here, we've got the cucumber plant on its own. There's a bit of a little reservoir in each bucket. There's about 1 inch of water that accumulates once the nozzles spray periodically. And then here is an example of a 4-vessel bucket where you'd have 4 plants to a bucket. They are 3-inch net pots, and you have 4 plants to a bucket. There's a little reservoir there, but I will show you guys in a minute where the main reservoir is. I'm going to take you guys with me to the beginning of the system, to the start of the reservoir, to show you how it all works. So this is where the system starts. This is the reservoir that houses all the water and the nutrients that's going to be circulated through this system and returned back. And up here we've got the pump. So I'm going to take you through the process and the journey of the water and nutrients through this bucket system. Here is the pump that operates the whole bucket system. As you can see, there is a water inlet line and a water outlet line The water inlet line is what actually connects to the pump. This pump sits in the reservoir and it circulates the water all through this line, through the water outlet, and the water outlet disperses the water between each bucket, and then it gets circulated back through this return pipe into the reservoir. Yes, I am using a garbage can as a reservoir. This system didn't come with a reservoir that was the proper size for my tent, so I MacGyvered a little garbage can here. It was clean, of course, and we just drilled a hole and just stuck the pipe through, and it actually works very, very well. It holds about 20 to 25 liters of water at a time, which is great for my plants. At this current growth stage, I only fill it up about once a week. Now, before we jump into how the water travels through the system, I want to show you guys one of my favorite features of my bucket system. Right here is where I can set the on and off time. I can set it down to the second. So right now, our system is off for 3 minutes, on for 1 minute and 30 seconds. The water goes through the pump, through the water outlet, and then splits off in this T here, which feeds water through the lines of both sides of the buckets. As you can see, every bucket has 2 entry points where the lines connect to the nozzles and feed the plants. It's got a part where it ends off here for the last bucket, and so on and so forth. All the buckets connect using the same water line and the same water source. I just shut the water off for a second because it can get loud, but I'm going to turn it back on and show you guys. So now the pump is on. It's sucking up water from here, feeding it through the outlet, feeding it through these lines right into the buckets. Once the watering cycle is complete, any excess water from the buckets will return into the reservoir and the process starts all over again. So now that I've given you guys a basic idea on how the Dutch bucket system works, we are going to go through every component and talk about how it's assembled. When it comes to the construction of these buckets, one of my favorite things, similar to the tower, is that the frame is on wheels, which is wonderful. Depending on where you're growing, it makes it very easy to move the system around if needed. This frame is about 8 feet long and 2 feet wide with 6 wheels. And I took some of the buckets off on this system just to give you guys a better idea. So on the frame rests a column. Over here you can see what the frame looks like, and I am assembling the column onto the frame and the buckets follow. The column has 20 holes to accommodate 20 buckets. This column is split into 2. It is about 8 feet long in total, so each half of the column is 4 feet. There are holes drilled into the column, and I'll show you guys what those are for in just a minute, but the column is where the water sits. So over here, the bucket has a little hole that drains any excess water, and the water flows through the column. And the column is actually connected to the water return pipe here. So as you can see, everything is connected together, and the water that is any excess water in the buckets flows through this column and gets returned into the reservoir with this return pipe here. So that is how the excess water gets moved from the buckets to the reservoir. So I'll show you a closer look at each individual bucket. All right, let's dive deeper into the specs of the buckets themselves. So here we have a bucket. My system in particular is made up of 20 of these buckets, but depending on the size of your system, you can have as little as 2 buckets or 5 buckets. It really depends on what you're looking to grow and what you're doing with these buckets. But with mine in particular, this is the bucket. There's 20 of them per system, and then again, as mentioned previously, depending on what kind of lid you choose will determine how many plants per bucket. So the size of the bucket, we're going to measure just to be sure. So depth would be my biggest concern because the roots grow down toward the water. We've got 9 inches in depth, which is pretty good, by 8 by 10. So even if you have a plant with a really large root system, this bucket has more than enough space for it to thrive. So on either side of the bucket, we have connectors for lines that connect to the nozzles, and there are 2 per bucket that make sure the roots stay moist and fed with the proper nutrients. Then inside, we have this little pipe here. This is what helps collect a little bit of a reservoir in the bucket. And then once the water in the bucket reaches a certain level, so up to here, it begins to drain, and I'll show you how. So this hole right here is crucial for bucket drainage. As I mentioned a minute ago, the water reaches a certain level in the buckets and then it begins to drain through this hole, which is why it is important to make sure that these 2 are connected when assembling the system. Now, in terms of the lines that connect the buckets together, they are just regular plastic 1/4 of an inch lines that have different connector pieces depending on how many buckets you want to connect together. If I wanted to, I could only connect 4 of them and have a 4 bucket system, but since I've got such a long frame and a long column, it doesn't really make sense for me, which is why I only keep 1 system operational at a time. So as mentioned before, these lines are what connects all the buckets together, and they are what feeds water through the nozzles. So now we're going to take a closer look at the nozzles, and I'm going to show you the different components. Okay, so this is the nozzle that mists the nutrients and water to each of the plant's roots. So inside the nozzle, it's comprised of 3 components. So this is the head. Then we have this little spring, and inside the spring goes the piston. So it goes like this, and then it goes inside the nozzle head. And then from there, it gets screwed onto the other portion of the nozzle that is attached to the line, and that's it. In terms of nutrients, same thing as the Grow Tower. I am using the Floranova series from General Hydroponics. It is tried and true, and my plants love this stuff. So we've got the Floranova Grow 7410, the Floranova Bloom 487, and the Cali Magic. The Grow is what my plants are currently consuming. Once they start to flower, we will transition them to the Bloom, and as always, we add in a little bit of Cali Magic to help our plants take off. In terms of what you can grow in these buckets, the possibilities are endless. If we're talking things like cucumbers, melons, and zucchinis, stuff from that family, I would recommend a 1 vessel bucket. I've got my cucumber plant here in a 1-vessel bucket. It's only a couple weeks old, and you can already see that it's forming quite a large root system. So a plant like this deserves to be on its own. However, smaller plants, I've grown tomatillos in the 4-vessel buckets. Those do really well. I've got my zinnias in the 4-vessel buckets, smaller root system. So it really depends on how well you know your plants and the root system. I've had it before where I grow something in a 4-vessel bucket and I quickly have to repot it because the root system just gets out of control and they actually impede each other's growth when there's too many plants per bucket. So we're gonna take some time. I'm gonna show you guys all the things that I've tried growing in these buckets. Starting with what's currently growing in the buckets, I've got my beautiful straight 8 cucumber plant. It is thriving. Now, depending on what you're growing, if it is a cucumber or melon or zucchini variety, you are going to need trellis support. I've got mine here. Moving down the lineup of plants, I've got tomatoes. These are actually tomato plants from seeds that I took from store-bought, greenhouse-grown cherry tomatoes that were so delicious. I couldn't get enough of them, so I figured, you know what the heck, let me harvest the seeds, grow them myself. So here those are. I've got 8 of those. And then I'm a big bell pepper gal, so these got off to a rough start, but I've got bell peppers growing here. Now, the interesting thing about bell peppers is they grow quite large, almost like a tree, but you want to keep your peppers per plant limited to get them to the full size. So in the past, I've grown them in 4-vessel buckets, but from my experience, they do much better when there's more space for the roots. So this grow, we've opted to put them in the 1-vessel buckets. Over here, I've got a Chinese 5-color pepper. It is definitely struggling. I screwed up my nutrient levels right from the get-go, and so it is having challenges. But as you can see, there is new leaf growth, so I am not giving up on this guy. We are going to keep him in the buckets because I have faith that it will bounce back. Moving on, I've got another suffering plant. This is an ancho poblano pepper, same deal. I screwed up the level of nutrients, obviously, because these buckets share the water and nutrients. And so this plant was suffering, but again, we've got new root growth, so I'm going to keep at it. We do not give up here. We just keep on trying. And as previously mentioned in other videos, these are my zinnia seedlings. Zinnias are a flower that I love to grow in the summer in my cut flower garden. They are so abundant, so I decided to throw some in my system and see how they do. It'd be so cool to have an indoor flower garden all year round. Here are some of the different varieties I've grown in the buckets. I've grown sweetie tomatoes, big rainbow tomatoes, black seaman tomatoes. Those are all heirloom and non-GMO and organic. And as previously mentioned, I had an entire bucket system. That's 20 buckets filled with bell pepper plants of every color. It honestly was incredible to look at. Every time a new pepper would ripen, the tent would fill with beautiful colors, and don't even get me started on the flavor and the sweetness of these peppers. My goal for future grows is to get larger peppers out of my yield. I've had so many wonderful harvests of the varieties I've already grown, but I'm excited to be trying some new ones. I'm also excited to be trying a bunch of different pepper varieties this grow. Last grow, I just did bell peppers and jalapenos, and they turned out great. I also tried to grow eggplant, but it kept on flowering because I didn't hand pollinate. There are so many things I haven't tried in my bucket systems yet that I have plans for. Can you grow root vegetables? I don't know. I should try it. Can I grow things like celery? Perhaps. I have some seeds, so we're gonna try it. If there is anything that you guys want to see me grow in the buckets, drop it in the comments. I will procure the seeds, and we're all about having fun here. This is just one big experiment. So let's have fun with it. Let's see what the heck we can grow in these systems, what works, what doesn't. And again, I'm here to make the mistakes and to go through all the trial and error so that you guys don't have to. That about sums it up for the bucket systems. If you guys like this video, please don't forget to like, share, comment on it, and please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. For more information, you can visit www.thefreshprincess.ca, and as always, follow me to learn more.